So thanks to all of you for joining us to launch the Participatory Grantmaking Project to build equitable economies for immigrants and refugees in the Peel region. My name is Myriam Berube, and I worked at the Tamarack Institute. We have partnered with the West Mariam Masefa Fund to launch this participatory grant-making project in one Ontario community to support immigrants and refugees' economic mobility. And we are very, very excited to announce that Peel has been selected for this project. And we're delighted to partner with your community in this initiative. We are very committed to work for and with immigrants and refugees to remove barriers and ensure their ability to thrive. So as people keep joining in, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat box. And I will tell you in very short story, what's the process that got us here today. Well, in late August, we held a virtual community information session convening different stakeholders across Ontario to share information about the project, but most importantly, to seek their advice on what criteria should guide us in selecting one community. These co-developed criteria related to population makeup, to community readiness, to recognize needs in the community, assets and opportunities. We then invited communities to express their interests through a letter, and we had a great response. We were very happy about that. And we must say that the community collaborative Peel Newcomer Strategy Group made a strong case for the Peel community. But before I introduce you to my colleagues and the partners that are with us on the call today to tell you more about this very exciting project, I'd like to start this meeting with a few words of gratitude and a land acknowledgement. Next, please, Connor. So we begin this session by acknowledging that we are meeting on Indigenous land. And as settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous people who have taken care of this land. I'm calling in today from the traditional territory of the Ghanaian Gehaga people. Jojage, which is colonially known as Montreal, was also a place of gathering for many First Nations. So as settlers, this recognition of the contributions of Indigenous peoples must be clearly connected to our collective commitment to truth and reconciliation in our communities. So I invite you to take just a brief moment to reflect on your own commitment to this work. So this is our agenda for today. I want to thank my colleague from the Tamarack Institute, Justin and Connor, for their support in this work. And I'd like to introduce you to Marina Nouri, Associate Director, Strategy and Programs at the West Mariam Masefa Fund. We also have with us Liz Weaver, who is President and Co-CEO of the Tamarack Institute, and Jessica Quick, Director of the Peel Newcomer Strategy Group. So I will first invite them to say a few words each about who they are and why they are involved in this work. We'll then provide information about the Participatory Grantmaking Project and the People's Panel. And we'll take time to answer your questions. As we do the presentation, please feel free to use the chat box during the meeting to ask your questions, and we'll make sure to answer all of them at the end of the presentation. We'll also seek your advice on the community's priorities and the recruitment process for the People's Panel. So this is our program for today. I'd now like to invite Marina to start by saying a few words. So on to you, Marina. And next slide, please, Connor.
Thank you, Myriam. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marina Nouri. I'm the Associate Director of the West Mariam Masefa Fund. And I'm really glad to see you all joining this exciting event. And I would like to congratulate Peel Region for being selected as a community for Participatory Grantmaking Project. Mariam Masefa Fund is a part of WES, World Education Services, and WES is a social enterprise whose mission is to help people learn, work, and thrive in new places by helping society recognize the value of people's education and experience. The core business of WES is credentials evaluation service for people educated abroad. Mariam Massefa Fund is a philanthropic arm of WES and is fully seeded by WES revenues. The fund's North Star is society and economy where immigrants and refugees thrive and can achieve their aspirations. We provide grants and impact investments, and we build partnerships to catalyze innovative solutions and that drive economic mobility for immigrants and refugees. We value solutions that center the agency of workers in the design and implementation, and also solutions that deepen the bench of leaders with lived experience. We are also very passionate about growing the movement to foster welcoming communities, workplaces, and economies in general. So this project, and if we can go to the next slide, this project that will be implemented in Peel is the first participatory grant-making model that the fund has supported. We see a lot of urgency for philanthropy to change the traditional practices that it has been using for a long time and shift resources and power to communities that are most affected by pressing social, economic, and environmental challenges. With this project, we are hoping to learn from immigrant communities themselves about their issues, particularly those related to the economic mobility. And we're hoping that the solutions that will be funded through this project will help improve the economic outcomes for all. As a fund, we're also hoping to learn from this project around participatory approaches, and we're hoping to use these learnings in our strategy going forward to implement more participatory approaches in the way we do our grant making. And we're also hoping to share these learnings with others in the field. Thank you, Miriam, and I will pass it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Marina, for this presentation of the Mariam Massefa Fund. I would now invite Liz Weaver, co-CEO of the Tamarack Institute, to say a few words about the Institute. Liz?
Thanks so much, and hello, everybody. So happy to see so many of you on the call today. Like Marina, we're very excited, Tamarack is, to partner with the West Mariam Massefa Fund to launch the Participatory Grantmaking Pilot, and also really excited about the role that the Peel Newcomer Strategy Group has played in helping to identify Peel as a community and to connect us to lots of you. So Tamarack, for those of you that don't know very much about us, we are a charitable organization that's based in Ontario, although we work pan-Canadian. So we work with communities across Canada, and that's really core to the work of Tamarack. We have about 400 communities that we're working with, and we think this project fits into our Vibrant Communities category. And it's really what we do in our Vibrant Communities work is work with citizens at the local level in communities to work towards better outcomes for their communities. And our focuses are ending poverty, building youth futures, addressing social isolation and loneliness through deepening communities, addressing climate transitions, and building participatory grant-making approaches, as we're going to be doing in Peel region. So we have to update that part of our slide. Where I sit at Tamarack is in the Learning Center. And so the Learning Center has the real benefit of learning from the work that's happening across 400 different communities and what they're doing really well, and also some of the struggles that they face. And we also look at, the field of practice overall, and then try to think about how could we make the work of change makers, all of you on the call today, and many others, how could we make it more impactful and more effective? And so that's what the Learning Center does, is it's capture the learning and then share it with everybody. And at Tamarack, we really believe in the R&D process, which is rip off and duplicate, not just research and development. Rip off and duplicate means that if you come to our website and there are resources that you really like or that you're accessing or that you'd like to share, we really believe in the co-generation of knowledge. And so we invite you to access those resources and then use them in your practice in your communities. One of the things that we're most excited about in the participatory grant-making pilot is our role of really learning what it takes to engage in participatory grant-making. And so part of our role at Tamarack is to not be the decision makers. We really see that as an important part of the People's Panel, but to track and to learn alongside the folks that are going to be on the People's Panel, and to document that so that we can learn, and then we can share the learning not only with the Peel region, but more broadly across Canada as well. So we're very excited about that. Back to you, Miriam.
Thank you very much, Liz. I'd like now to invite Jessica Quick, Director of the Peel Newcomer Strategy Group.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And really excited and just thrilled to be a part of this initiative. When we heard about it, it was through one of our partner stakeholders, and a key one at that, Shalini Dakunha, who's on the call, the director of the Peel Halton Workforce Development Group, who encouraged us to apply. And she's been one of many stakeholders who form part of our community collaborative that make up the Peel Newcomer Strategy Group, where we see ourselves as a friendly local immigration partnership, one of many that are funded across Canada through funding from the federal government, through immigration, refugees, and Canadian citizenship, as well as the region of Peel and the United Way, Greater Toronto. We're embedded within the United Way, and through our work, we engage various service providers around service coordination and thinking about how we can welcome newcomers and support coordinated settlement needs and services that way. And the way we do that is through a number of activities, such as community research and policy. We do a lot of evidence gathering from the community. So as Liz mentioned, there's lots of strategic learning that can happen through participatory grant making. We're definitely looking forward to that. We also do service integration work through a number of our own communities and through others. We do events and to support that, facilitated discussions and conversations. And we have a web portal called immigrationpeel.ca, which really serves as a hub for information for newcomers, employers, and service providers with, for example, a community services map. So that's a bit about who we are. And we applied, we can go to the next slide, because we felt that Peel actually does have some really key features about it in relation to immigrants and refugees, where Peel is uniquely an immigrant majority region in the Greater Toronto area, with 51.5% of the population being immigrants, and that's based on the 2016 census. And as you know, through the pandemic, we've all been working together around community needs, and many of them are emerging even more prominently. And it's been so inspiring to work with so many partners thinking about specific populations like international students, refugees, such as those coming from Afghanistan most recently, and unemployment and underemployment impacts on newcomers. And I know a number of partners even here have contributed a lot of different reports and strategies to support. And these are not necessarily the People's Plan, the grant making panel's choices for topics moving forward, or they may be, but just wanted to flag that these are the types of conversations that are emerging most recently, and that we're excited to think about through this work. But I think stepping back, also thinking strategically about the learning that can happen about how we can involve and enable the engagement of newcomers, such as immigrants and refugees, in strategic work such as participatory grant making. And I think that will just really support all of our learning as we work towards a more equitable economy in Peel, for example.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And thank you, Marina, Liz, Jessica, for making such a great case about participatory grant making. We'll tell you more in a moment about it. We can go to the next slide. I wanted to express that concretely in this project, Tamarack will engage community stakeholders to identify the needs of immigrants and refugees in the Peel community and to define funding priorities and processes for this project. And finally, to make community-led funding decisions. So Tamarack will act as an intermediary in the community, but will also partner with PNSG to facilitate the work and access to the data, the information, and the networks that are existing in the community. So we really appreciate this partnership. Now, a bit more about what participatory grant making is. So participatory grant making opens up the process to shift power, control, and voice to communities. It's a process that privileges the experience and needs of the community. One of the questions that we often hear is, how can it help community members directly impact the decisions that concern their community? Well, first, it can help them by giving agency to people from the community to define the strategy and criteria behind funding decisions. It can also help them by giving, by ceding the actual decision-making power about funding, usually done by foundation staff, to the very communities that those funders aim to serve, as Marina clearly expressed in her presentation. And also by supporting community members to build capacity. We can go to the next, please. So in my short intro, for those of you who join us a little bit late, I have mentioned some of the first steps of the process that got us here where we are today. So we're at number 4, where the star is. So we've gone through the key milestone of connecting with potential Ontario communities and seek their input on the criteria for selection. We received a letter of interest, and this is how we got to select Peel as the geographic community for the participatory grant-making pilot. So we are now at the point of starting the recruitment process of key community representatives for the People's Panel. And the People's Panel role, I'll talk about it in the next few slides, is really to define both the process and make the decision about funding. The role of Tamarack will be to engage those community representatives in the People Panel, facilitate and support their work to help them make funding decisions. We will also disburse the grants to selected organizations and provide coaching and support to funded projects all along the way. And we really hope, as it has been mentioned, to share learnings and insights on participatory grant making to help advance this form of grant making. A bit about our timeline now. Next, please. Next slide, please. So in September, we identified the community and launched the project in October. We hope to recruit the People's Panel through November and be able to start our work by the end of November with the People's Panel to identify grant-making priorities and process. And this work will go through the months of November and December until January. After that, we hope to invite participatory grant-making proposals from organizations in the Peel community and disperse the first allocations in March and April of 2022. The project timeline is until April-March 2023. And all along the way, we'll work on community engagement, support, and learning. So this is our initial timeline. We can go to the next to talk a bit more about how we envision the People's Panel. So the People's Panel, the main responsibilities of the panel is first to define the community's needs and priorities for this project. The People's Panel will also determine the application process. We talk here about the funding streams, the criteria, the amount, the duration of the grants as well. Are we going to allow several small grants, one big grant, collective project? What kind of priorities will be supported? All those kind of things will be determined by the People's Panel on the application process. And finally, make decisions about funded projects and organizations with available funds that can go up to $600,000. And finally, the panel will contribute to ongoing evaluation and learning of the project. The engagement that is expected from members of the panel is to work collaboratively, to respect the values and principles that will be defined by this group, and to contribute to the process in the best interest of the Peel community. In our first information session, lots of questions arose about conflict of interest. So what we say here is that if this situation arises, it should be declared by members of the panel before engaging in the grant making part of the process. You will see it's a two-part process. So if people feel that they might come in a conflict of interest, for example, because they represent an organization that would like to apply for funding, then it can be declared and we can recruit someone else on the panel for the final part. Next, please. What are we looking for in terms of panel's composition? So we are looking for 10 community members, seeking a balance, 5 individuals, 5 people representing organizations, aiming to represent a diversity of experiences in the Peel community. And when we talk about the diversity of experiences, we talk about in terms of geography, of ethnicity and cultural background, gender identity, age, lived experience of being immigrant, refugee, or part of a racialized group, and also working in the immigrant serving sector versus working in other sectors of activity. The commitment to be part of the People's Panel is to attend 4 virtual planning and design meetings. These meetings will take place starting the end of November for 4 consecutive weeks. We put here some proposed dates and times starting November 25th, but it shouldn't represent a barrier to apply. If someone is really interested and unavailable at those specific dates and times, we'll find a way around. So the idea is to have 4 meetings of 2 hours each in the planning and design process. After that, once the call for proposal will be launched, and we will be receiving the applications, we are planning 2 grant-making meetings in March and April 2022. The dates are still to be determined in relation to the process. And one question that was frequently asked is, are people, members of the panel, receiving compensation for their work? So the answer is yes. Members of the People's Panel will receive the GTA living wage rate for the time that they spend both in the process and the meetings. Next, please. So very quickly, the next steps, and then we'll open it up to questions. If you already have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box. So community members are invited to express their interest by filling in a simple application form and by explaining shortly why they should be selected for the People's Panel and what experiences or expertise they bring to this work. We're talking about something very short here, between like 250 and 500 words. And I want to stress that we highly value lived experience. At Tamarack, we refer to the context experts as those with lived or living experience, and to content experts for those with knowledge of the sector or the issue. And we really value both types of expertise, and of course, those two can overlap. Applications should be sent to me by November 15. And if anyone needs support with the application process, or for instance, if expressing interest by writing is an issue, please let me know and we'll find another way. We'll notify all applicants of the decision by November 19, 2021. So I think that's all on the recruitment process for the People's Panel. We can go on to the next slide, and I'd like now to invite you to ask your questions about the process, about what you've heard, hear some of your reactions, and then we'll seek your advice on the needs and priorities for the Peel community, and also how we should proactively invite people to apply to the People's Panel. So now I will turn it on to you, Liz, for this conversation.
Thanks so much, Miriam. So that was a lot of information. Before we go on to this slide, just happy to, open it up for clarifying questions about what Miriam just presented about the People's Panel and or the process that we've undertaken to this point. So any questions for Miriam? You can unmute yourself. Oh, raise your hand. Eunice, we have you up first with your hand raised. And when you've had your question answered, please lower your hand as well. So Eunice, unmute yourself and we'd be happy to try to answer your question.
Thank you very, very much for the opportunity. The question that I want to ask is regarding the application process, specifically the application form that Miriam just talked about. Should we be expecting, or rather should the organizations be expecting the link or the form to be sent to them? And by the way, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the programs manager for African Community Services of Peel. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much for that question. Miriam, do you want to answer it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for this question, Eunice. Yes, everyone taking part in this webinar today will receive the application form. It will also be on our website. And we really invite Peel's organization, especially those serving immigrants and refugees, to share it widely with their clients and with their partners.
In a couple of days from today, maybe even tomorrow, Eunice, we're going to be sending you the PowerPoint. We'll send you a link to the recording. So if you want to share it with others that you know, and also a link to the application process. So you can expect it, everybody on the call today can expect an email from us if you've registered with us. If you haven't and you're joining because someone else shared the link with you, if you reach out to Miriam at tamarackcommunity.ca, we will make sure that you get the recording, the PowerPoint, and a link to the application process as well.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Miriam, you did a great job in explaining all of this.
I'm sure there are more questions. Just feel free to ask them along the way as we go into the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, we have one more question. Varisha?
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
Just wanting to know if the knowledge needs to be verified in terms of data, or is it more anecdotal?
I have a question for you. The knowledge of the Peel region, is that the question? Is that what you're asking, or what do you mean by
the newcomer needs or the immigrant needs, however you want to frame it? Are you looking at data-driven information, or are you looking at more lived experience, anecdotal, any kind of information?
I think we will be looking for a mix of information. So we'll be looking for data for sure. And we have some partners that we can reach out to around that. Peel Newcomer Strategy Group is one of the partners we can reach out to for data, but we're also looking for experience and anecdotal information as well to help inform the People's Panel in terms of priority setting.
Thank you.
I think that's right, Miriam?
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
Thank you for that question.
You are always welcome.
Well, if you have any more questions as we're going through the next part, please raise them as well. But now we're going to shift slightly into this slide. And so one of the things that we thought would be important for part of the session today, because we have so many experts in the room, is to seek your advice on these two questions. So what are the most pressing priorities to support immigrants' economic mobility in Peel region? And then Do you have any people that you think, Tamarack should reach out to proactively invite to be part of the People's Panel? And a correlated question to that is, what criteria do you think are most important for selection? So Dinesh, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to jump in here? Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So I want to cover up the first part. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Dinesh Sharma. I'm the founder and CEO of Brilliant Minds Group, an organization supporting the immigrant community in the Peel region. I myself have been an immigrant, came to Canada 20 years back with a passion to serve the community. So to your questions, what are the most pressing priorities to support the immigrant economic mobility? The way I look at it is three things. The first thing is jobs, okay? On the one side, there is employers that are looking for the people in the Peel region, not only in the Peel region, but in Canada. And on the other side, there is people that are still struggling to find a job. There's a mismatch there. So somebody needs to step up and find that bridge or act that bridge to be able to meet the needs of both the employers as well as the newcomers. And I am humble when I say this. BMG is playing an important role in doing that. Okay, that's the first part. The second part, which is the most pressing priority in the Peel region, is, which will help the economic mobility also, is the mental health. The mental health is a big topic in the immigrant community, and Peel, as we know, is the hub of the immigrants. The mental health challenges are increasing. COVID has impacted the lives of the immigrants in the Peel region. Okay. The third and the important part of is the whole economic mobility and stuff like that is the challenges that the racialized women, seniors, and youth that are facing. The university graduates or the college graduate youth that passed their educations are finding it struggling to find their employment, which is then resulting into the challenges of the relationship issues between the youth as well as their parents. There are seniors at their homes. Okay, so the COVID, I'll give you a perfect examples. Okay, the biggest challenge which is happening in Peel at the moment is earlier the husband and the wife both were going to work. Okay, yeah, they have their respect of the responsibilities and stuff like that too. But now when the husband and wife both are working from home, it is expected, right or wrong, in the racialized community that the woman of the house will not only look after the office work, but will look after the house activities also. So there's a pressure on the racialized woman, which is then the woman of the house is saying, hey, I'm done with it. I can't do it. The divorce issues, separation issues, divorce issues are increasing in the Peel region, which is again resulting into, you call it economic mobility because the families are separating. There is a mental health issues are happening. So there's a whole lot of issues the COVID has presented within the Peel region. Okay. Great. So coming to your question, sorry, you had a question? Did I talk too much?
No, that's great. I think you've explained it really well. Are you gonna go to answer the next two? Because we've got a couple of other people who want to weigh in as well, but happy to hear some more, Dinesh, from you.
On who should be proactively invited to apply to the People's Panel. You
Okay.
rightly said, somebody who is from a racialized community, who has an experience dealing with the immigrants, refugees, newcomers, students, youth, anybody. So somebody who has an experience, who lived that experience should be invited, whether as an organization or whether as an individual, should be invited to the part. What criteria are important for selections? Okay, very important is knowledge, skills, and abilities are the one key factor. You should be able to connect with the people. Peel is dominated by certain communities. Okay, people like people, those who are able to connect with themselves. So I'll give you an example. Okay, don't get me wrong. Okay, people, a lot of people in the south, in the Peel region, are from the South Asian community. And for you to represent your community, you need to have at least one criteria. I'm not saying all the criteria, but at least one criteria that you should be able to represent that community. That's my 2 cents. Back to you, guys.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. We have people with their hands up. We have Eunice, and then Zari, and then Sue. So over to you, Eunice.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I back up everything that Dinesh mentioned. And to add on that, some of the key challenges, and I'll speak in terms of the demographics that we encounter at African Community Services of Peel. We do have challenges with internationally educated immigrants. You see, what usually happens is that there's this presumption that an immigrant doesn't know, and usually most of the immigrants that we experience, they are people who have come from their home countries, having worked for a number of years, and the bureaucracy, when it comes to validation of their credentials, there should be some infrastructure to kind of address that, because what is happening is that there's a lot of deskilling that is happening within the Peel region, people being pushed to precarious employment, and those are the demographics that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So in terms of who should be proactively invited to apply to the People's Panel, I would say those people who are dealing with the issues, exactly what Dinesh said. It's those people who are living the experiences, who identify with the experiences, who live those experiences so that they can be able to be the voice out of experience. That is one factor. The other one is for economic mobility. There's advocacy for jobs for immigrants. It's not just international, it's not just the education bit, but it's also the job advocacy, because we are seeing a fraternity of quite a number of people, and that I'm talking about cases that we have seen at African Community Services of Peel, people who have gone an extra mile, even after having been put through the bureaucracy of having to validate their education, going back to school. But even after graduating, they're still being relegated to precarious employment again. So you find that even with all the commitment, with all the effort to go to look for jobs, still their effort is not recognized. So, and what it tells us as an organization, it's more of a systemic issue where people who are marginalized in a particular way, whatever effort they make, it's not being recognized as effort. And to me, what I think should be done, first, as I said, international education being recognized as education, international experience being recognized as experience, international working experience also to be recognized as experience, and also open avenues. There should be an advocacy that advocates that for these immigrants. And I believe that due diligence needs to be done to validate that these people have really gone to school and they have worked, but they should not be put in a position where even after they go back to school and they acquire these skills, or even make new paths altogether, having to be put in a position where they are not recognized. And that is where the issue of mental health, as Dinesh is talking, that's where the intersectionality is coming in. I have come in here with the hope that I'm making a better life. Okay, I have gone back to school after realizing that my education, my experience does not matter. Then what? Even after that, it don't matter. So that's the issue of the intersectionality of lived experiences of the demographics in Peel region. It's more of like coming in, being shocked that their education, their experiences don't matter, or even the avenue to go back to school to get the resources is not there. But even after they make an effort to go to acquire skills or to restart their life, they're not given the opportunities, and now the mental health issues come in. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Eunice. And the other thing I would say before we get to you, Zari, which will be in a minute, if you have any core documents that your organization has developed around the issues that you think would be helpful to the People's Panel, please feel free to send them to Miriam, because they're all really helpful to us in terms of looking at, what your organization might have identified as priorities as well. Over to you, Zari.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. It's a pleasure for me and an honor for me to be able to, join this panel discussion today. I am from Red Shawl Women's Community Organization, and we were part of doing a study with Wilfrid Laurier for, the main topic of study was the gender analysis for closing the gap for economic stability of new immigrants and newcomers in Canada. And based on that, we've done a few programs, which is, later on I can tell you more about it. But I think, coming back to the two questions that we are talking about today. So I feel that there are two pressing priorities. One of them is very importantly is what are the determinants for the the immigrant economic stability? Because we know that a lot of people who immigrate, and I'm one of them. I immigrated to Canada for quite some time ago now, and many people who come to Canada do well. So looking at the determinants for the economic stability, and the second one is what are the factors that actually help them move up on the mobility, scale? Because we also see that 50 to 60% of people do move up on the mobility scale. So for us to understand what are those factors would be very key. And then, who should be proactively invited? I think it will be good for us to have, even if as an advisory role, one or two people who are refugees or who came as refugees themselves, because that's a huge range of factors that they deal with, and particularly women if they're coming as principal applicants and all. And then to bring them on to be able to share their experiences, their lived experiences. So that would be the context. But for the content part, I think it will be important to look at people who have had the experience of doing grant work in the past, and doing proposals for governments and institutions like the nonprofit sector. I mean, the main criteria would be, of course, both the experience, the lived experience, and the experience to have been working on those kind of possibilities in future, because it is time commitment. It is a lot of sharing of your, and also working in a group. I think that's an important factor as well, because I don't know. Oh no, you said 10 people. So people who are working together, who can interconnect, who have that commitment. So thank you so much.
Those are great suggestions. I don't think we had thought about people who had written grant proposals, but there certainly is a perspective that they bring. So we appreciate that, Zari. Sue, you're next. You had your hand up as well. And I know some of you have also been putting things into the chat box. So we appreciate that. And we will download all of your ideas from the chat box as well. So for those of you that, feel more comfortable putting things in the chat box, please do. But over to you, Sue.
Thank you. This is why you don't want to go last, because I think I'm just going to echo some of the sentiments that are already in the chat box and have already been stated really well by my colleagues, but I will elaborate. So with respect to the first question around pressing priorities, I completely agree with Dinesh and all his 3 points, particularly the mismatch between employers with jobs. But then I'm going to jump on what Zari just said and speak to, what are those indicators and what are the determinants, right, to ensure that that happens. And we have best practices in place and solutions. What we don't have is general practice. And that's sort of what attracted me to this and this type of community work. We have everybody off doing their own thing and not always collaborating and sharing, particularly in the economic inclusion space. And so I think it's really important that, you know, to your next question, who should be at the table, you definitely need workforce development experts there, and not those that just do employment services, but those that understand the strategy behind it and have wrapped their employment service model into a workforce development framework that was designed specifically to combat systemic racism and assist marginalized job seekers to have that competitive advantage. And that's where we would walk into that discussion around determinants. You know, what are those factors? I can tell you their access to social capital, their access to commensurate employment, and their access to good advice. And by good advice, I mean, so many programs are told by so many employment programs are told by their funders, we have to get them Canadian experience. You know, that's what we want as an outcome of this program. So they do it at the expense of the skill set and the education of that newcomer, and send them into to selling their talent down. Like they send them into volunteer positions and unpaid co-ops. And if you look at the history of co-op and volunteering, it's to get your foot in the door when you don't have pre-existing understanding of how to navigate those environments. But when you come from another country and you've got 10 years in at a very senior or middle level, the worst advice you could possibly give is go give that away and sell yourself down the river. It only exposes you to further marginalization, but it's a very common practice. So I think it's really, really important that we bring the people that have the solutions in play. And I hear people talk all the time, similar to Dinesh, when they talk about that disconnect between jobs and employers. It doesn't exist across the board. I was here in Peel region, but I also know that I engaged, 1,200 employers at any given time to support employers into commensurate employment within the Peel region. So it's not a reality, but it's a perception because it's not common practice. So I think we have to bring, and there's other organizations that do it well, and there's a lot that don't. So I think it's just really important to bring people with that specialization to the table, and will challenge existing practices that repeatedly get funded.
Great. Anything else, Sue?
Not without, I think I echo everything all of my colleagues have said so far. Yeah, as far as the most important criteria, I also like hearing the special interest group representation. So I'm certainly not saying you want a whole bunch of workforce people at the table. You don't. And then that opportunity to identify and leverage what currently exists.
Great. Thank you so much. Najma, you have your hand up next, so we're happy to hear from you.
Thank you. Really happy to be here, and I see some former colleagues, Sue, and a few others that I've had the pleasure of working with. I am a recent retiree per se, and COVID kind of precipitated that even more so, which was nice, but it was really nice that I'm able to join in. And I do share and understand and have lived the experiences of the individuals that have spoken before, and also from a professional perspective, applied those experiences in my career path, working in the former city, myself in the city of Toronto, and been very active in Peel as a resident and volunteer for the last 34 years. So I bring this perspective, but I want to answer your questions in that, and I don't disagree with the comments that have been made, and I think that sometimes perceptions are 9/10 of reality, and it depends on whose lens and who's the power broker. So I really value the project that you brought forth, and I think it's something new that I've just come across. And from the point of view of an opportunity to get involved in it, was very exciting to hopefully be able to merge paths. I think the issue of needs, I'm more focused on solution-based asset and building and strengthening and really addressing systemic issues, because these needs have been there since over 34 years in Peel and in other parts of GTA. And it's getting even more pressing now, I would say. And then with COVID, a lot of those needs have been compounded. and the diversity and the depth of diversity and the realm of diversity within the immigrant and newcomer community is such that we just tend to scratch the surface and we apply the same rules, and each community is distinct and has different nuances. There's a lot of commonality, but we have a tendency as funders and institutions and government and United Way Project people to trying to do the best, but to try and do it in such a way that it can apply to all aspects of being an immigrant, newcomer, or refugee, and the stages of their settlement integration into this community. And somebody can be here 20 years and still not have integrated, but would be expected to just because they have a job and stuff. And others can be here 3 years and move on. So sometimes time matters and doesn't. So I would like to see the needs looked at from different ends. I think the one area that has been mentioned twice, and from personal professional experience, I would say is a huge area that's been missed by a lot, but needs to be done in a more strategic manner, is to focus on employer engagement and stakeholder engagement in that context, but to do it from a collective perspective or a sectoral perspective. Because I think in the Employment Ontario and the employment sector, workforce development sector, that has been a gap, and there are some leaders. Sue mentioned that, and as her agency is one of them, but there are other leaders, and I'm pleased to be part of that kind of work. But I think that that's important, and I think one of the areas is with this changing labor market, and I think the labor market is that influence and driver. The pace by which immigrants and newcomers will actually be able to identify opportunities needs to be kind of looked at. And what are some of those strategic ways that we can be creative and use this learning opportunity to create pathways that can actually vault them into success, as opposed to building on past experience and trying to find new ways of tweaking them. I say that because the labor market is changing faster than we can all blink together. And I think it's not just about jobs, but I think it's about looking at changing the mindsets of our immigrants and newcomers that want to work or create work for themselves and for the future. So I think from that lens, I think it is a definite need, but I think it would be something to think about and test drive. I think in terms of violence against women is an area that has shown its ugly face, even more so significantly in COVID. It's something that does not discriminate across communities, whether any socioeconomic or racialized or non-racialized community. And I think that the solutions are very cut and paste and very cookie cutter approach. And so I think are there opportunities to look at ways that we can support and strengthen families as opposed to breaking up families and having them start from zero. I have over 25 years experience working with individuals on social assistance in that system sector, managing the Ontario Works program and employment strategies. And I'm going to say that, you know, when people are living in poverty and it's growing in Peel, I think that we force them to take a longer term around. So those might be areas to explore and be creative. And so maybe the way that you manage, if the panel had the opportunity to look at how you do these grants, it's about looking at maybe different aspects and solutions, so building on what's there and doing it for more than just 1 year. Because I think the problem becomes that we start something great, but it takes a long time to evolve. And so how can we collectively mobilize other funders through this experience to make more strategic community investments so that we can actually grow and change systems as opposed to band-aid solutions and towards systemic change, because the issues have been the same, the systemic barriers are the same. We've had different solutions. So I say that from that lens, and I didn't want to repeat all the stuff that people have said because I would concur with those needs. So if we took a solutions focused as opposed to a needs based, I think maybe then we can look at it from the other side in that. So the priorities and the criteria, I think have been evidenced, and I think people who are, when you talk about organizations and balance of people, I think it's what are the experiences that come in? Can you cover off some of those areas? It's a 50-50, but my experience in working with panels is sometimes people will come and it's about empowering people to become leaders in the community. And so can this be used as a way to engage, especially for newcomers and immigrants when they are struggling, trying to adjust? Is that a good proportion? Like, are there supports available through this process that will help them develop their capacity beyond just participating? Because they can participate, but are they going to be able to articulate and voice, and are they going to feel comfortable? So creating that environment accordingly. But I think it's important in that way to have that balance. So I agree on that. But, so certain sectors or needs, lenses can't be covered, then maybe the organizations can cover off because they represent those mandates and communities and voices, and we'd hope that they will be able to articulate them. So workforce, I agree with the broader lens there, and entrepreneurship and all those elements that come under that banner. I also think poverty and the other areas that are growing in this community that are destabilizing individuals and families. So I would like to see those areas addressed as well, building on the great work that's happening in the field.
Great. Thank you so much, Namja.
Najma.
Sorry, I
no, that's okay.
Inverted the letters. I apologize.
Yeah, I know, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to say, but thank you.
I appreciate your perspective about solutions-based and looking at how to build the capacity of individuals who are around the people's panel, both capacity and connection, because sometimes you learn about other people and other things when you're in these kinds of processes, and they also create other kinds of opportunities that you hadn't necessarily identified in advance. Hey, we're coming to the end of our time. I know we had an hour scheduled for this webinar. Want to thank everyone, and I also want to send it back to Miriam for a final little bit of wrap up. So over to you, Miriam.
Thank you very much, Liz, for facilitating that discussion. Once again, I want to thank everyone for sharing your insights and ideas about this question. This has been a very enriching conversation. We're taking good note of everything that has been said. And as we mentioned, you will be receiving very shortly an email from us with this presentation, the recording of the session, and also the form to take part in the People's Panel. So we really encourage you to reach out to people that you know that you think could contribute to the panel and encourage them to participate. And if there are any issues, you can always reach out to me, and I'll be pleased to help in every way I can. So thank you very much again, Marina, Jessica, Liz, for presenting and building this great partnership. We're very happy that you are with us today and looking forward to collaborate more.